The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
I guess we can debate what the greatest sports day of the year is. Some might say Super Bowl Sunday. Some might even say Championship Sunday in the NFL. Maybe old-timers might say Game 7 of the World Series or Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals or the NBA Finals. But I don't think we can debate for days, that these two are the best of the year. Thursday and Friday, the opening weekend of the NCAA Tournament. There's nothing like it. And I'd be interested if they could calculate these numbers as to how much work gets done after noon on Thursday and Friday. The sports bars are packed today. This is a perfect sports bar day, and it's just so cool to see upsets happen and the place explode, but then they move on to the next game, which may be coming down the stretch as well. 16 games today, 16 games tomorrow. By the time we get through the weekend, it seems unbelievable when you start out with 68, but by the time they get through the weekend, we're down to 16 teams. It's an incredible rush this first weekend. Now, Sweet 16 weekend is great as well. And then we get to the Final Four, which for a day, I would say that Saturday has to rank among the best sports days of the year, where you got the back-to-back games. They used to play them a little bit earlier. I'm not crazy about the second game tipping off close to 9 o'clock, but it is what it is with primetime TV, and that leads us to Championship Monday. So this is just a great event, and I love it every year. And I don't know much about many of the teams that are going into this. I'll learn about some of them as they advance. But it is so much fun, and it's just great when you're around a bunch of people having wings and drinking beer and watching the tournament, and that's what it's all about. We'll get to that, and excuse me, and things that are happening there. There was a story, though, that broke this morning in the Washington Post about, and it feels so good to say this, former Commanders owner Dan Snyder. Former owner, you know that he had his house up for sale. This is the one on the Potomac River, the one where he cut down a bunch of trees, and that's what severed his relationship with the Washington Post. You know, early on, Snyder got cozy with the Post, and he was giving them stories. And then they wrote a story about him cutting down trees without asking permission. I guess he paid a significant fine for that. But this is the house that he lived in for about 20 years. And he had put it up for sale in February of 2023, so just over a year ago. Sat on the market for 6 months. He reduced the asking price from $49 million to $34.9 million. Now, the Post says he was still in a position to make a boatload of cash because he had purchased the house from King Hussein in 2001 for $8.6 million. He added 15 total acres, so more money added to it, but it was eventually a 30,000 square foot estate, which he named River House. It was completed in 2004. And even at $34.9 million, I believe he was going to make money on it. But instead, the Post says he has donated it to the American Cancer Society for the tax deduction. Property records show that on March 7th, ACS Development Company, which owns and operates real estate for the American Cancer Society — I didn't even know they had their own branch of real estate — purchased the home for $0. A spokesman for the American Cancer Society said the organization intends to sell the property and use the proceeds to advance our mission of improving the lives of cancer patients and their families. We are incredibly grateful for the gift, and the generosity cannot be overstated. Now, there are reports, there have been reports that Snyder had been trying to sell the house since 2018. And so it sat for quite a while. And remember, in 2022, 2 years ago, Snyder listed England as his usual residence. I assume he's there now or on his yacht. But the Post says he also owns a 16.5-acre property near Mount Vernon, and that he purchased it for $48 million in 2021. Also owns property in Aspen, Colorado, which is allegedly where some of the shenanigans went on with team employees with accusations that he sexually harassed them there. So he does still own property in this area in Mount Vernon, and, of course, the property in Aspen, Colorado. It says in the story from Nikki Jabala today, by donating the real estate to charity, Snyder can claim a deduction of his income tax that is equal to the appraised value of the property. So, for instance, if the property were appraised at $45 million, he would receive a tax deduction of $45 million and would not pay taxes on the gain, which he would have had he sold the property to a private buyer. And remember, when you take it in $6 billion and only having to pay out, $60 million of that in a fine, that's a significant capital gain, and you got to offset some of that with deductions. So this would be, again, I don't know what the property would be assessed at, but $45 million would be a significant tax deduction for Dan Snyder. Look, I hope I never see him again. It's also, I was talking about this with friend of mine the other day, Larry Duvall, who had produced television for many years, Channel 9 and Channel 5. And he said, hey, has anybody tried to get an exclusive interview with Dan Snyder? He didn't do very many of them when he was the owner of the team. I can't imagine he'd be willing to do one now. And even if he did, would you believe anything he said? And would you really be interested in hearing Dan Snyder lie? I don't think so. I think what's best for the fan base is that we never speak his name again, that we move forward with the new ownership headed up by Josh Harris, who's a local guy who's had success in other businesses, owns other teams, and Dan Snyder is forgotten. But that property on the Potomac is gone. It goes to the American Cancer Society, and he takes the tax deduction. On to the tournament. Jay Billis on last night with Tony and Mike on PTI and looking at the top seeds. And the question was, what is the shakiest of the top seeds going in?
I think it's two, actually. It's Houston and North Carolina, just because of the second round games that they have. If Mississippi State beats Michigan State, that's a really tough game in the second round for North Carolina because they're big, strong, and they can defend at a high level. And same thing for Houston. They could wind up playing Texas A&M if they beat Nebraska. Texas A&M is the best offensive rebounding team in the country. They are tough, and they've got a great scorer in Wade Taylor IV. They played earlier in the year, played to a 5-point game where Texas A&M made a huge comeback to have a chance to win the game. But I think those are really difficult second-round games for both Houston and North Carolina.
Well, Jay, we know Tony's going to obsess over the number one seeds. I'm going in a different direction and going to ask you about any sleepers you might like. And let me declare off the top, I am picking Illinois to go all the way, largely because of Chicago and Terrence Shannon. But tell us who, if anybody, you like among anything you deem as a sleeper.
I do like Illinois. I think Illinois has a great chance to get to an Elite Eight, if not a Final Four. But some of the ones further down the seed list, I think New Mexico, an 11 seed, was misseeded. I think they're much better than 11. And they've got a pretty good path to get to the Sweet 16 and perhaps beyond. I think Oregon is better than their seed. I'm not saying they were misseeded simply because they didn't have N'Faly Dante for the first 10, 12 games of the season. He's played the last 20, and he's been outstanding. And they're playing their best basketball right now. I think Drake is a team to keep an eye on. Because they have Tucker DeVries. They're a very good shooting team out of the Missouri Valley Conference. And then I'd say James Madison, who won 31 games, beat Michigan State at the Breslin Center at Michigan State earlier this year in November. They've got major conference talent, and they've won all year long. They're one of those teams, they haven't just gotten on a hot streak. They've been winning since day one, and I like those kind of teams.
All right, we'll have to wait till tomorrow to see James Madison play Wisconsin. The first game to kick things off today, Mississippi State against Michigan State. I guess there was a time where the number one seed would always kick things off. That would be Connecticut, but that's not the case. First time we'll see a number one play today is at 2:45 when North Carolina plays Wagner. Wagner's the team that outlasted Howard the other night. Great game with Howard almost pulling off a 17-point comeback, but that'll be a 2:45 tip. I'm a little disappointed about this because I wanted to see him play, but unfortunately North Carolina State is not tipping off against Texas Tech until 9:40 tonight, and sometimes that gets delayed if the previous game goes long. So a game that's going to end probably close to midnight, I'm not going to be up for. But I'm really enjoying watching, or have watched and enjoyed watching DJ Burns, who's the center for North Carolina State. The game for the ACC Championship, where they beat North Carolina on Saturday night at Capital One Arena, is one of the best college basketball games I've seen in a long time, because I saw a player that was similar to the players that we used to see and don't see anymore. DJ Burns is 6'9", 275 pounds. He's a senior, and like a lot of these guys, has been to multiple schools, started out at Tennessee, transferred to Winthrop, became the Big South Conference Player of the Year. Then in 2022, he went to NC State, spent the last 2 years there. He's a big fella, and he's got a soft touch with his left hand. He's got some really good post moves, and he said, quote, I like playing in the post. It's something that people have kind of shied away from, and it's something that I've always embraced. I feel like it's made me different. Oh, yeah, in today's game, he's different. You don't see a guy who looks like that, and you don't see a guy who plays like that. But it is really fun to watch, and he took Armando Bacot to school. Bacot is a fifth-year player at North Carolina. He does commercials, national commercials. I just noticed he's doing one for a tax preparing company. I mean, he's all over the place. And I had really not heard of DJ Burns until Saturday night when I watched that game, and he was just so much fun to watch. I don't know about their chances to beat Texas Tech tonight. I'd like to see him do it so I could see him play this weekend. But, boy, that is really a different type of player. And he was named the ACC championship game MVP and hit his first three-pointer of his college career in that game. First one. Playing now 3 different schools. He came out in 2018. He was the number 5 player in South Carolina. The number 1 player in South Carolina, Zion Williamson, who seems like he's been in the NBA for like a decade now. It's just the nature of the way college basketball is played. As for the Final Four, Jay Billis with his picks, sarcastically, he goes with chalk, but phrases it this way.
I have 4 sleepers in the Final Four. The sleeper UConn.
Illinois.
The Cinderella Arizona. Another sleeper in Houston. And then the ultimate sleeper in Purdue. I think Purdue's going to put down the baggage that they're carrying from the last 3 exits that they had to double-digit seeds. I like the path that they have, and I think and believe that they're going to play with more of a purpose, not a concern of trying not to lose, but I think they're going to play to win. And you guys remember when Virginia lost to UMBC, the first number 1 overall seed to lose to a 16 seed. They won the national championship the next year. Then Purdue loses to Fairleigh Dickinson last year. There's precedent for them getting there and winning it all. But I like UConn to win it all.
Yeah, look, I respect Jay Billis's knowledge. Just because it happened with Virginia doesn't mean it's going to happen with Purdue. They could just as easily choke again this year as they have the last couple of years, losing to double-digit seeds, and last year becoming only the second number 1 seed to go down to a 16. So just because it's happened before in another program doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen with Purdue. But, again, I respect Jay's knowledge and how he views the game. The women's game, this is the first year that I'm really interested in it. I plan to watch at least games that Caitlin Clark plays. I hope she makes it to the Final Four and maybe the national championship game. They don't play until Saturday. Caitlin Clark's team, Iowa, they have the way they do it in women's basketball, the top seeds get to do it on their home court. So they're going to be playing in Iowa, and they're going to play Saturday against the winner of the Holy Cross Tennessee Martin game. And should advance there and then get to the Sweet 16 next weekend. Dawn Staley is the number 1 seed in the tournament. Her team with South Carolina, they're undefeated this year. She was on yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show and was asked about how she views Caitlin Clark, having been in the game for over 30 years as a player and a coach.
I think she's the greatest of her time. Now, I don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers, but I also don't want to, we got a rich history of women's basketball. Rich. We got a player in Brianna Stewart who won 4 national titles. And you cannot forget about all the contributors of our game. Like Caitlin Clark's brought a lot of eyes to our game, and I'm really grateful for her talent. And I do think she's incredible, like remarkable, eye-catching. I mean, she's got great IQ. So I got to give it to her. Like, she is definitely a woman that continues to grow our game.
And I go back to Ann Meyer. I go back to Nancy Lieberman, Cheryl Miller, Shamik Holdsclaw. I mean, Cynthia Cooper. There's just so many of those players. But I do think because of Caitlin Clark, like, we're bringing back some of those names because now, which is good, and it should be. So when somebody says, is she the greatest of all time? Well, if I'm going to take the person who wins, Breanna Stewart won 4 titles and was the most outstanding player in all 4 years. You can't do any better than that.
You can't. So, and it's nothing against Caitlin Clark and all the people that love her. Like, I'm a basketball enthusiast. I love her. Like, I love what she's doing for the game. I love when she hits logo threes. I love when she hits game-winning shots. I mean, all that is tremendous. I watch. Like, I spend a lot of time watching Big Ten basketball because of her. And that's got to be a lot of responsibility for her and a lot of pressure for her. And she's handled it incredibly well.
Did you think you could play in the NBA?
The NBA?
Yeah.
For how long? I could play a game. Like, I could play a game and hold my own. It's just the long stretch of an 82-game season and the wear and tear. Those guys are big and strong, and they're the very best for a reason.
But you had to play against these guys, I'm going to guess. Yeah,
I mean, I played a bit against some NBA guys. And I mean, you go up in Philly, you think you can do anything, and North Philly particularly. So, so I can say that now, sitting here, being over 50, I could be an urban legend.
Why not? She was a great player, Dawn Staley, when she played 25, 30 years ago. I don't think they had the WNBA yet. I'm pretty sure they were starting a couple of other leagues that really never got off the ground, but she's got the number 1 seed and an undefeated team going into the tournament. Tonight, they are playing the first 4, which is what the men just completed. A great game, by the way, last night between Montana State and Grambling. Grambling was trailing most of the way. It kind of played out like the Howard game, only this time Grambling sent the game to overtime and they won. And it was their first time in the tournament. First time. And so now they get to play Purdue, okay, but they got that far, which is really impressive, and it was a great game last night. So tonight they play the women's first 4. It's Auburn against Arizona, followed by Holy Cross against Tennessee Martin, and, of course, the winner of that second game will go play Caitlin Clark in Iowa on Saturday. And off we go. Coming up, legalized gambling in sports, it's not going anywhere. But there is some collateral damage, and it's starting to rear its ugly head. We'll get to that next. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Got Mike Callow in for Tony today. Also yesterday was the pro day for Caleb Williams, and a large contingent from Washington was there, including Coach Dan Quinn and GM Adam Peters, and from the highlights I saw and the reports, he knocked it out of the park. I mean, Caleb Williams checked all the boxes, and there's even a report from one of the insiders, might have been Rappaport, who says that the Bears are already 100% decided that they're going to take him number 1. Robert Griffin III, who has put out this idea that Williams should refuse to go to the Bears because of the way they treated their last quarterback, that he should not go there and pull an Eli Manning. He expounds on that theory when he talked to Dan Patrick yesterday. We'll get to that in the next hour. Meantime, I guess it's the number 1 story in sports, and we're waiting to find out more details on it. It is... I'll get to more on it in a second. The story of Shohei Ohtani's translator being fired by the Dodgers with reports that he stole money from Ohtani and gambled it away. Okay, that's one thing. and that is something I think you're at least a little bit aware of. You may not be aware of this, and this addresses a problem that is probably going to grow as more and more states have legalized sports gambling, as it becomes more prevalent, as they try and draw more people into the tent to gamble. And it's been in the NBA, and one of the first people to say we need to have it is Adam Silver, the commissioner. He said it a number of years ago. He says, you look at European countries where people bet on their phones during the games, we got to have that too, and they have it. And it's successful. And let me not be hypocritical. I'm not anti-sports gambling. I have done commercials for it. I have made money doing those commercials. I don't gamble a lot, but could. I'm not against it. But there are some issues with this. So J.B. Bickerstaff, the coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers, was doing his pregame news conference last night. That's the way it works in the NBA. Reporters have access before the game to talk about them. We talk about things like injuries and playoff prospects or whatever they want to get into, and then they want to keep the postgame as short as possible, so they just focus on the game itself. So this was prior to last night's game. And he was asked about a comment that was made by Therese Halliburton of the Pacers, who said he sometimes feels like a prop, like a gambling prop. And I don't think anybody expected this, but this is what J.B. Bickerstaff said in response to being questioned about Therese Halliburton saying he sometimes feels like a prop.
I definitely see his point of view. We've had our own, I personally have had my own instances with some of the sports gamblers where, they got my telephone number and were sending me, crazy messages about, where I live and my kids and all that stuff. So it is a dangerous game and a fine line that we're walking for sure. It brings added pressure. It brings, a distraction to the game that can be difficult for players, coaches, referees, everybody that's involved in it. And I think that, we really have to be careful, with how close we let it get to the game and the security of the people who are involved in it, because, again, it does carry a weight. A lot of times the people who are gambling, like this money, pays their light bill or pays their rent, and then the emotions that come from that. So I do think we're walking a very fine line, and we have to be extremely careful in protecting everybody who's involved.
You said they're kind of getting close to that line. Do you feel like they've crossed it in some areas, or? Yeah,
and there's no doubt about it that it's crossed the line. The amount of times where, I'm standing up there and we may have a 10-point lead and the spread is 11 and people are yelling at me to leave the guys in so that we can cover the spread, like, it's ridiculous. But again, I understand the business side of it and the nature of the business of it, but it is something that I believe has gone too far.
Hang on a second. Are you getting threats?
Oh yeah.
Did you turn that into?
Oh yeah, they took care of it.
Yeah. You ever find it? Did they trace it back to?
They found it. Yeah. Yep.
Charges?
No charges, but they found him.
When was that? This year?
No, last year.
Last year. Okay, but it doesn't mean it's the end of it. Doesn't mean that there can't be other incidents like this in other places. Now, where the Cavaliers play, they have their own sports book in there, and fans can bet on their phones in the arena. And not every state has legalized gambling, but it's coming, and it's legal here. The Wizards are so bad, I don't know how you could make a wager. I guess you could say the other team's going to cover the spread or whatever, but I don't know if it's as bad here. Cleveland's a pretty good team. J.B. Bickerstaff, by the way, the son of Bernie Bickerstaff, was longtime Bullets assistant and later head coach of the Wizards. And just to recap, he says he's getting phone calls at home from gamblers, threats, real threats. He's got kids. This is serious stuff. He said he turned it over to the league. They caught the guy, no charges. What? I don't understand that. And he's right. This is a growing problem. And I think the leagues kind of knew that this might be coming, but they also thought, well, if it's legal, it's monitored, it's taxed, so the government knows about what's going on with it. But still, this is mainstream stuff, and it's probably going to get worse. Now, the Ohtani story, they're doing whatever they can right now to isolate it to the guy who was caught in this. And the guy who was caught is the interpreter for Shohei Ohtani and has been since 2017 when he joined the Angels. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Ippei Masuhara, and he has been fired by the Dodgers organization because it was reported by the Los Angeles Times and ESPN that Mazuhara's name had emerged in connection to a federal investigation of an alleged illegal bookmaker who had been taking in a lot of bets. And reportedly, according to where this story reads, the interpreter, who has known Ohtani for 11 years, they first met in 2013 when Mazuhara was working as an interpreter for a Japanese pitcher for the Red Sox, and got to know Ohtani, who was playing professionally over there. So when Ohtani signed with the Angels in 2017, the team hired Mazuhara to work with him as his personal interpreter. And he was making, according to what ESPN has, between $300,000 and $500,000 a year. Pretty good gig for 6 months to work, to travel around with a major league team and just, hang out with Ohtani and translate what he says. Pretty good. ESPN said it spoke to Mazuhara on Tuesday night, at which point the interpreter said that Ohtani had paid his gambling debts at Mazuhara's request. After the statement from Ohtani's attorney saying the player was a victim of theft, ESPN says Mazuhara changed his story Wednesday, claimed Ohtani had no knowledge of the gambling debts and had not transferred any money to bookmakers. So what is it? Is it Ohtani knowing about the gambling debts and saying, hey, you better pay these off, and I'm good for it because I just signed a $700 million contract with the Dodgers? Or was it he didn't know? And I think baseball has to do everything it possibly can to make it clear that he didn't know anything about this. Now, Mazuhara is claiming that the bets were on international soccer, the NBA, the NFL, and college football. It was not on baseball. Quote from Mazuhara, I have never bet on baseball. Where have we heard that before? That's 100%. I knew that rule. We have a meeting about it in spring training. Oh, yeah. Pete Rose said he never bet on baseball for a long, long time before he finally admitted he bet on baseball. And he bet on his team. And he said he never bet on his team to lose. He also said he never bet when he was a player, even though evidence has turned up that he did bet as a player. And right now, the best thing baseball can do is isolate this to Mazuhara. Hey, Ohtani, he knew nothing. And Mazuhara, who's, probably, I don't know if there's if he bet with an illegal bookmaker, could there be charges on this? And the way that he is talking here, trying to keep the blame isolated to himself, is he ready to take the fall in an effort to make sure Ohtani is not dragged into this? Mazuhara said he incurred more than $1 million in debt by the end of 2022, and his losses increased from there. Quote, I'm terrible at gambling, never going to do it again, never won any money. I mean, I dug myself a hole, and it kept on getting bigger, and it meant I had to bet bigger, and to get out of it, it just kept on losing. It's like a snowball effect. It's all him. He wants to make sure it's on him. Well, so far, that seems to be the case, or at least that's what's reported to be the case, but we don't know. And this was Dave Roberts, the manager of the Dodgers last night, pulling a Sergeant Schultz when asked about this, including the report that Mazuhara addressed the entire Dodgers team, knowing he had been fired the other night.
I can't comment on it, man. On that, can't comment.
Was the decision made to have him address the team?
Anything with that, the meeting, can't comment. Sorry.
Were you surprised when you found out he was fired when that happened?
Again, can't say anything. I'm not going to comment, guys.
With Shohei, obviously, this is a big thing in his life. How has he handled it from what you can tell? Are you worried about it being a distraction with him? Just that part of it. What have you seen so far?
Shohei's ready. I know that he's preparing in a hitters meeting right now and ready to go for tonight's game.
Who's going to be his interpreter right now?
Will the Thrill.
And then I know Like, I think Ipe was supposed to be the in-game interpreter for Yamamoto. Is Will going to take that role now too?
Tonight, he's gonna handle that tonight. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
And we'll go to Juan to your right, Dave.
Dave, was there any consideration for him not to play in today's game? Like, did you have to have a conversation with him at all?
No. I think that he's ready to play, and that was not considered.
Hi, Steve Wade from AP. You had a bomb threat yesterday. Today we have the issue with Ohtani. How much focus does that take off the baseball and your players? How much focus?
We're here to play baseball, and obviously with what happened yesterday, we did a good job of focusing on a baseball game. We're going to do the same thing today.
Does this sully the series a little bit, these two incidents?
I'm very excited about this series. Our experience here in Korea, I think my players feel the same way. And we're excited about tonight, and we've got our hands full with Musgrove and the Padres. So ready to play tonight.
That was before today's game with the Padres in Korea. They're coming back, and in the meantime, I'm sure there are investigative reporters looking into this. But look at how this has come out. Ohtani is very private in what he does. He keeps his inner circle pretty tight. Like, at the start of spring training, he's a guy who's scrutinized not just here, but around the world. There's an enormous contingent of Japanese reporters that follow him everywhere he goes. And he just said, oh, yeah, I got married. Oh, really? Well, no paparazzi pictures, nothing. No, I quietly got married. And now this gets out there. And here's his interpreter, quick to fall on his sword. Oh, yeah, I was stupid. I'm a bad gambler. Never going to do it again. Yeah, my fault. All me. And then he first told reporters that Ohtani told him to pay off the debt, and he's got the cash to do that. And then he changes his story to say that Ohtani had no knowledge of the gambling debts and had not transferred any money to the bookmakers. So this stinks. This has a bad scent to it. And, boy, the last thing that baseball wants is to have to discipline Shohei Ohtani. And if you have to use precedent, depending on how deep this goes, you got to ban him for life like Pete Rose, right? I mean, how can you have Pete Rose banned for life for betting? The interpreter says they never bet on baseball. Okay. Maybe that's the case, but if it's found out that's not true, and it's pretty damn easy to bet on baseball, and if you have inside knowledge of what goes on in the game as an interpreter, you're hearing things in the clubhouse that you're not hearing anyplace else publicly, not in any publications or any news accounts. No, you know some stuff, and that would seem to give you an advantage. Now, I guess he was a terrible gambler. I guess he's not lying about that he built up all these losses. But this is just scratching the surface, and we'll see what happens as the summer goes on. You know, we first heard about Pete Rose. It was like, really, bet on baseball? Well, no, there's a rule in every clubhouse that you can't do that, and he denied. Then he was brought in front of the commissioner and was presented with a mountain of evidence that was gathered by John Dowd, and they worked out a plan where Rose would be banned from baseball without admitting anything. And then the following year, he thought he could just apply for reinstatement. Well, Bart Giamatti, who issued the punishment, the commissioner, died like a week later. And after he had banned Rose, he was asked at a news conference, do you think he bet on baseball? He said, yes, I think he did. And they had enormous evidence that he did. So far, all we have is this, that the interpreter was caught red-handed with these gambling debts. He's been fired. Ohtani paid off the debts. But that's just the beginning. And you got to hope if you're Major League Baseball, the Dodgers, or just a fan of the game, that there isn't anything other than what we have here on the surface. But a lot of times you wait and the other shoes start to fall out of the closet, and people report on other things, and they get information from various sources, and before you know it, you got one of these Don Van Natta type of pieces of, hey, look at this, and then baseball will have nothing else they can do. Remember, when Pete Rose was banned in 1989, the media world was a lot different then. It was controlled pretty much by newspapers. There was no internet. There was no real, day-to-day reporting like they have now, or minute-to-minute, I should say, with Twitter and other sources. This is 2024. Things could ramp up rather quickly on this one, and I'll be interested to see how it goes. Coming up next, how does Danny Hurley do it? How does it work in this day and age? He explains as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Herm Edwards, who was the coach of Jayden Daniels when he was a freshman at Arizona State before he transferred to LSU. He did a podcast with John Keim the other day and tells you what we can expect if Jayden Daniels is in fact drafted number 2 by Washington, and it's looking more and more like that is going to happen. Caleb Williams held his pro day yesterday, was tremendous, according to the highlights, according to those who were there, and the Bears have already decided, reports are, that they are taking him number 1 overall, which means that Daniels would fall to number 2, and Washington would be able to take him. They could still take Drake May. We don't know. But Edwards with an assessment of what he has seen, and he says he stayed in touch with Daniels in the 4 years that he was at LSU. So pretty good breakdown of what he's seen from him. You can have your issues with Herm Edwards. He was basically booted out of the school for cheating. But what is cheating anymore in college sports? It's just not the same. Speaking of cheating, Minnesota Timberwolves employee fired, arrested, charged with felony third-degree burglary for allegedly stealing thousands of internal files, including strategic NBA information from a team executive, according to a criminal complaint filed Wednesday and obtained by ESPN. I think this happened in a front office move in baseball, where one executive moved from team to team and took his old files with him, and I guess had to be fired on this. This is theft, and this is more a felony here. On February 2nd, the complaint says Sanchin Gupta, a Minnesota Timberwolves executive vice president who oversees the analytics department, left a hard drive in his office at the Target Center in Minneapolis. That drive contained Gupta's personal financial information as well as private information for the team, including employment and player contracts. When he came back to work on the 5th, the hard drive was missing. Subsequent surveillance reviewed by security revealed that this man who was arrested, Somak Sakar, who is 33 years old, subsequent surveillance revealed that Sakar had twice entered Gupta's office on February 3rd after looking to see if anyone could see him. He then left. Another employee was able to recover the hard drive from Sakar, and the team determined after forensic analysis he had accessed more than 5,000 files. Sakar arrested Monday, and police executed a search warrant at his home where they found several hard drives, a computer, and 3 tablets. A second warrant revealed that one of the devices contained information from the hard drive. When questioned by police, Sakar said that a member of the coaching staff had put some stuff on it but had forgotten to return it. Anyway, this is the age of information theft. Used to be that you could sneak into the office and get the files and go to a Kinko's and copy the files and put them back. Now they know when the hard drive has been taken, so this could, and in the information age, any kind of information is of value, and so now we got somebody arrested in that. Tournament starts today. We got 16 games today, 16 games tomorrow. Connecticut, the defending champion, is the prohibitive favorite in this. And Danny Hurley had a conversation with CBS Sports, in their morning show. They're promoting the hell out of the tournament because they have most of the games. And Hurley explained how in this new age era, how he coaches his team old school.
I'm honest. I'm honest about what your role is going to be. I'm honest about how hard I'm going to coach you.
Your practices are harder than the games, your players say.
Yeah. You make the conditions of practice absolutely as brutal as you can make them. As stressful, as competitive, as intense, so that when we bring what we do over to game night, we don't really have to do anything but just transfer that onto the court. And then my role changes for them. I go from this taskmaster that's never satisfied to, I become like more of a cheerleader for my guys on game night.
So maybe that's the key to coaching, and maybe that's essentially how all coaches coach, that you're tough on them in practice, and then once the game starts, you got their back, and you try and sometimes you have to yell at them. You see that happening, or sometimes you just pat him on the back. And he has obviously been successful doing what he's doing. It sounds like, if you watch, it was a series that was done maybe 10 years ago about his dad, Bob Hurley, who was a legendary high school coach at St. Anthony's in Jersey City. Really tough neighborhood, worked as a police detective for his day job, didn't even take a salary for working at St. Anthony's, but turned out prospect after prospect for college, including his two sons. The older son, Bobby Hurley, became a big star at Duke, led them to a couple of national titles, was a first-round pick in the NBA. Didn't work out quite as well for Danny as a player, but it's obviously worked as a coach. And sounds like, from having watched some of that his coaching style is the same. It's a different level, high school players trying to get to college versus college players trying to get to the NBA. But obviously it's been successful for him. And while there were doubts about him last year, I think when we look at what he did with his team, coaching had a lot to do with it. Now he's considered to be one of the great coaches in the game and will cement his place in history if Connecticut can repeat. They are prohibitive favorites to do it. And since the turn of the century, or actually since John Wooden's teams, and I guess the last time that he won consecutive titles was 1973. That was Bill Walton as a junior when he had that incredible game against Memphis State. I think he was 22 of 23, 44 points, and they repeated as national champs. 74, they lost in the semifinals in double overtime to NC State, which went on to win the title. And then UCLA, after the Walton gang had graduated, they won again in 75, and that was it. So I guess between 1973 and 2024, so there was that 51 years, there's only been 2 repeat champions, right? The team that repeated for Duke in 1992 or 1991 and 1992, and then the Florida team from 2006 and 2007. And Hurley has a chance to take his place among those great teams. It's funny that the Florida team isn't more celebrated, while the Duke team is, the back-to-back championships, but the Florida team, which was loaded with pros and guys who could have gone to the NBA and decided to get one more championship with Billy Donovan as the coach. People talk about Billy Donovan as a great coach. Maybe it's because he's gone back and forth to the NBA. Maybe that has something to do with it. But he doesn't get mentioned among the great college coaches of all time. He's not in the Pitino conversation. He's not in the Krzyzewski conversation, the Roy Williams, the Dean Smith, right? It's odd. And he's one of 2 coaches to have back-to-back champions since UCLA did it during those incredible years of John Wooden when he won 7 straight. 73 was the 7th straight championship that team had won, and he won a total of 10 during his career. Meantime, March Madness, and we will not have to wait long for one of the great stories of this tournament, as Long Beach State has a 2:00 tip against Arizona. Now, Arizona is the number 2 seed in that region, so you're looking for a 15-2 upset, which has happened before. 15-2s have happened before, but it's unlikely. But maybe not as unlikely as the story of Long Beach State. Dan Monson has been their coach for 17 years. A week ago Monday, he was told, "That's it, you're done. We're not bringing you back next year," and he had to go and tell his team that before they went out and had to play in the conference tournament, which they wound up winning, which is why they were in the NCAA tournament. But Monson was on CBS's morning show the other day with Nate Burleson and Gayle King and discussed how he had to tell his team after he had been told, 10, 11 days ago, that he was out of a job.
It's a day you'll never forget because it was probably the lows of low as far as having to go in there and tell them that I would be done. And one of my youngest son is on the team, and my oldest son is a graduate assistant. So you have your kids in there kind of
they were good when they knew about it ahead of time, but a few hours. But when they got with their teammates, it was really a gut-wrenching moment, and yet it's a moment I'll cherish forever, because as a coach, you don't really know. It's like a parent. You don't really know how much they love you until they show you, because you're disciplining them, you're holding them accountable, you're pushing them, and so you don't know. Maybe they do care or don't. But that room that day, I'll never forget, because of the love and the emotions that went with it. They can take any job from you, but they can't take that bond you had with your team.
I love to hear that, Coach, and we're all excited for you. It's good to see you. It's been a while. I was in Minnesota when you were in Minnesota. We have a special connection there. But you're a big proponent of staying in the moment, and I love that, because a Cinderella story is one thing. But how do you get these guys to focus on not just being happy to be in the tournament, but be ready to win in the tournament?
Yeah, it's that's what makes it March Madness. It's not just one thing. You have to galvanize, and that Monday we really did. You could feel a different bond between all of us in the room. They asked to be alone for about 30 minutes, and then I said, what do you guys want to do now? Because I didn't know if they just needed time alone or what. And they said, let's watch it, because I talked about watching film, and I told them, just us being together is not enough. We're not playing good enough. Our defense has got to change. And so we went and watched a little film, and the first play I showed him, I said, now see how we closed out here and we're short, and he's wide open. Yeah. I said, we're still going to lose games unless we fix this stuff. This is the kind of play that will get a coach fired. And the room just broke up laughing, and at that point on, we just kind of had fun with it.
Yeah.
Coach, I know everybody that knows you says you are not a petty Betty, that you are not holding anything about this. But I have to admit, I'm feeling some kind of way about how you were treated and how this all turned out. So I'm wondering, for you personally, what are you learning from this? What do you want to teach about this? How do you plan to move forward through all of this? And do you still want to continue to coach?
Well, it's been a week of reflection. I definitely have reflected and know that I still want to coach, because this is, when people tell you can't do something, it really, as competitors, really stokes the fire back up. But as Nate was talking about, one of our mantras is to stay in the moment. And I've gotten really emotional once or twice, and it's when I'm thinking about other things, like what happens next week, or what, is this going to be my last game? And so I've really, it's really been a great, as you said, with these players, you're preaching with them to stay in the moment, and if you miss a shot, you got to come back and make the next play. And so I'm learning from them too, because they've been so resilient this week, and the ability they've had to stay in the moment. I wouldn't be doing justice to them and being the coach that they need if I didn't do the same. So it's been I wouldn't trade this week for any job in the country, because it's just been fun to go on this ride with these guys.
Who's given you the best advice during this time, especially when you got emotional? Who's given you the best advice?
Well, last Saturday before our championship game, I thought they were running out of gas a little bit, so I tried to talk to them about the tournament and how, we'd have Selection Sunday the next day, and we were going to do it at our house, just us as a family. And that was the one time that I got emotional in front of the team, and they started cheering and said, "We got you, Coach." And then afterwards, I asked our captains who had been in that championship game 2 years ago, what do we need to do to get over the hump this year? And Jayden Jones, our captain, said, "Coach, we just need to stay in the moment. The moment will not be too big as long as that's all we're worried about. But if we're worried about the moment and something else, that's when it gets too big." And it just struck to me, here I am talking about Selection Sunday and the tomorrow, and that's when I got emotional, because I was thinking outside of what we had in films and what we had at our task in front of us. So my players, like I tell them, I've learned more from them this last week than they've learned from me, and that's that relationship and all the people,
awesome
the outpouring has been just tremendous that I wouldn't trade for anything.
It's Dan Monson. Now, he got this kind of mid-major thing going many years ago. He was the coach at Gonzaga before Mark Few. And in 1999, he got them to the Elite Eight. That opened a lot of eyes about a school the size of Gonzaga. He took that success and went to Long Beach State and had been there. Well, I guess he made a stop at Minnesota in between, but then wound up at Long Beach State for the last 17 years. And, people weren't really paying too much attention until, hey, you fired him. And he took that, went on to win the conference tournament, put himself in the NCAAs. And, if they make a run like Gonzaga made 25 years ago, who knows? And I love that part where he's showing tape to the team and he says, hey, this is the kind of play that can get a coach fired. That's funny. So I'm rooting for them. See what happens this afternoon. I don't think they have a great shot. A lot of people are picking Arizona to go to the Final Four, but, it's March Madness. Anything can happen. Coming up, Herm Edwards on a podcast the other day with John Keim, telling people what to expect from Jayden Daniels when he comes to the NFL and possibly here. We'll get to that next. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Mike Callo's in for Tony at 11 o'clock. The basketballs start bouncing at 12:15 this afternoon, and I can't wait. Meantime, the draft speculation continues. Pro day yesterday for Caleb Williams. Reports are the Bears have seen enough. They're taking him number 1, which means that Jayden Daniels would be available at number 2 to Washington. Mel Kiper, among others, thinks that's going to happen. Could still be Drake May. But if it is Jayden Daniels, someone who knows him well is Herm Edwards, who recruited him to play at Arizona State, stayed there a year, then went off to LSU. But Herm says he stayed in touch with him and is obviously very impressed with this quarterback and talked about it on John Keim's podcast about not just Daniels' ability to run, but his ability to stay on the field.
He knows how to fall. I've always said that about quarterbacks that leave the pocket. You better know how to fall when they tackle you. So he doesn't miss time. And I just think, him playing all these games have helped him. I mean, he's played a lot of college football. I think, was it 50-something games or something like that? So he has a lot of experience playing football. And I think the more you play, it's like anything else, the more experience you gain, but also knowledge and confidence. And so, I've seen that watching him. I used to talk to him before the games. We would text or something. I wasn't coaching him anymore, but we were always in communication. And so I just like where he's at right now.
And what it takes to succeed in the NFL. So what are the things that you see in him that says this translates really well to the NFL?
Well, I think obviously if Washington decides to select him, he has to realize, and we've kind of talked about it. I said, look, if they decide to select you, I said, you have to realize you're going to a franchise right now that they need some help. I mean, this team, last year struggled. I mean, in a lot of different ways, and you're going to be the guy that's supposed to resurrect this team, and there's a lot of pressure in that. But he likes that. I mean, he can handle that. He really can. It won't be too big for him. The thing he does is when he plays football, he understands at the quarterback position how important it is to protect the ball. Yeah. He doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. He doesn't turn the ball over a lot, right? So he gets that part of it. And that's the hardest thing for young quarterbacks, I think, when they come in the league. They have the enthusiasm and they feel like I got to carry the team and I got to make a play. And lo and behold, they turn the ball over. And you look at this team last year, minus 14 in the giveaway takeaways. They with 18 interceptions, I think 11 fumbles, only scored 19 points a game. They struggled offensively. And here's the next part. And I think that they'll realize these guys gave up 60 sacks. Now, he cuts down half of that with his ability to run, right? Because he can leave the pocket and go make plays. So defensively, you got to play him a little bit different now. This is a different cat. when he goes back. You better make sure you got a spy on him. You better make sure your rush lanes are in coordination with the call you have up front, because he'll leave the pocket. And when he runs, it's not for 5 yards. It's going to be 20 yards. It's going to be 30 yards, and he's a little faster than you think. He's a long strider, but he covers a lot of ground, and he's a really good runner. So I think that's an attribute for him that already you bring if you draft him, he brings that to the table.
So that's Herm Edwards, the freshman coach of Jayden Daniels, coached him as a freshman at Arizona State before he went to LSU, and that's his ability not just to run, but to go down. And that, that point he makes about knowing how to fall, that may seem silly, but I remember when I was covering the Giants back in the 1980s, and the game was a lot different then. You could kill the quarterback. I mean, the rules protecting the quarterback have changed dramatically over that 35-year period. And I remember talking to Phil Simms about it, and he said, that's a big part of it. It's like skiing. You have to know how to fall to protect yourself. And the Giants' offensive line, it got better, but there were times when they had injuries and it wasn't really that good. They were also a run-designed offense. It was a run-based attack with a defensive coach and Bill Parcells and Bill Belichick as his defensive coordinator. They were interested in running the ball, chewing up the clock, keeping their defense off the field as long as possible. So when it was a throwing situation, 3rd and long, I mean, look out Phil Simms. And he took some sacks, but he knew how to take them. And I think that's an important point that Herm Edwards makes, that he knows how to fall on those type of things, quarterback pressures, and also when he's out in the open field running. And when he runs, this is Edwards, what he's been able to see from Jayden Daniels on that.
He's unique. I mean, he's a unique runner. And I always told him this, when you run, I said, and we used to laugh, he always hugged me before the game. And I would tell him, I said, now know when the journey's over now. Just know when the journey's over. I said, Jayden, the most important thing you have to realize, you have all this talent and all this ability, but you got to play the next play. Mm-hmm. You can't be standing on the sideline with me talking about my shoulders hurt or my legs hurt because I was running. You can't do that. You can't miss plays. And to his credit, didn't miss a lot of time. He doesn't miss a lot of time, but he's a smart runner. He knows how to protect himself. He looks like a little, he reminds me a lot of Randall Cunningham, because Randall Cunningham had that same kind of frame. He was slight, but was strong, knew how to run. Almost like Gumby. I mean, when you hit him, he could contort his body, right? And I was with Randall when Randall came in as a rookie when I was in Philadelphia. And so Jayden has a lot of those traits as far as what he looks like. Right. He's not an imposing big guy. He's not like Herbert and those kind of guys where he's thick, he's 250 pounds. He's not that. Right. But he's strong enough and he's smart enough to know when to protect himself.
So you would have seen the progression as a passer as well. And you talk about the studying and all that. How much of it related to that? Or were there other things that he was working on? Because he did improve, like on the downfield stuff. He did improve.
Yeah. That's what he was really good at, throwing the long ball. I mean, he had a touch and accuracy to that. And I think the hardest ball for most quarterbacks to throw are the little 5-yarders, right? The swing passes to the backs. Keep them running, keep them moving. Don't throw behind them. It takes accuracy to do that. It takes timing to do that. And I think he's developed that, obviously, versus press coverage. Where do I throw the ball, right? I got to throw it away from the safety. What technique is the corner playing, right? I mean, you got to learn all that, and that takes film study. It takes a lot of work with your receivers, and he's put the time in. He's worked at it. It was when you're a freshman, you come in, you're living off talent. We all do. I mean, in the NFL, when you're a rookie, you come in like, okay, I'm not going to learn it all right away my first year. There's this learning curve, but he understands what his strengths are. And he understands how to play to those strengths. And, the thing about Jayden is the game is never too big for him. Mm-hmm. The lights aren't too bright. I mean, you see guys, when the lights are bright, they run to the shade. No, he runs to the spotlight. He's not afraid of it, right? He's very competitive. He's a competitive guy. He really is. He wants to win. He likes to win, and so it doesn't come on that way because he's not a vocal guy. He's not one of those animated kind of guys. He's really kind of right here all the time. You know, and sometimes you look at him and go, what's it? He's just here. You know, he can make a good play, and when he does, it's boom, and then it's done. And he's moved on. You know, he's going to the next play. If it's a series of bad events, you know, comes over, we used to sit and talk. You good? Coach, I'm good. I said, okay, let's move on. And he can move on. He doesn't dwell in the past. He lets it go and he moves to the next play.
That's Herm Edwards. And whatever you want to say about Sam Howell and all the sacks that he took last year and the turnovers, he was, just as Edwards describes about Daniels, even-keeled and son of a coach. And even players commented on this in the huddle as well. He could do, to have a terrible play, get in the huddle, get right past it. Didn't stick with them. The good plays and the bad plays. So that's a plus. That was a plus, and that's, I think, one of the reasons that Sam Howell was desired by several teams, and Adam Peters was able to make a really good deal with Seattle, in which they wind up with the equivalent of like a late third-round pick. So well done on that, and I would expect Edwards to say good things about him. You know, he's a guy who played for him, and they remained close, obviously. That's a big thing. The other thing that Edwards mentioned was that he reminds him of Randall Cunningham. And I heard Mel Kiper say this the other day as well. And if you watch Randall play, there were times where you might say to yourself, my God, that could be the best quarterback I've ever seen. Consistently, he couldn't do it. He bounced around from team to team. He played for Cowboys. He played for Minnesota. Should have been an Eagle for life. Should have been a great quarterback. And I remember having this conversation with Sonny Jurgensen. Dropping some names here today. Phil Simms and Sonny Jurgensen. But I did. I was talking to Sonny about this. And he said, Randall Cunningham, this is the Hall of Fame quarterback. And Sonny knew the game and knows the game. He said Randall Cunningham, he thought, could have become one of the greatest of all time had he had any coaching whatsoever. And he said his biggest problem was he was drafted by the Eagles and Buddy Ryan, a defensive coach, who had no real interest in coaching him. He just wanted Randall to run around and make some plays, and he was going to have his defense take care of the rest of it. As a matter of fact, if you remember this, when Cunningham came into the league, Ron Jaworski was still playing for the Eagles. And they came up with this cockamamie plan where they would just play Randall on third downs. Well, that didn't work for either one of them. And you really got to get some, continuity at quarterback. You got to get the rhythm of the game, the feel for the game. So he was brought in poorly into a system that maybe didn't help his development in any way, and maybe kept him from becoming one of the greats. But Randall Cunningham, if that's a comp, that could be amazing with the right type of coaching. If Cliff Kingsbury can have the right type of coaching with Jayden Daniels, and he is as talented as Randall Cunningham was, look out. Because you saw Cunningham make some plays where you go, oh, my God, how did he do that? There was the famous Monday night play against the Giants where it looked like Carl Banks had him sacked, and somehow he was able to, jump back, stay on one foot, and then throw a touchdown pass. I'm not saying Daniels can do something like that, but the body type is similar. He's tall, he's lanky, and if he can make plays and throw the ball. I mean, Cunningham had a great, great arm, and Daniels apparently does too. So, hey, and what do I know about scouting quarterbacks? But from what you hear, that sounds incredibly promising. And if they wind up with Jayden Daniels, I think that would be a big plus here. All right, Mike Callow is in for Tony next. I will see you back here tomorrow morning as the brackets go up in flames this afternoon. See you at 9 a.m.